It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley as we begin a Thursday. Gary, good morning.
Good morning. Another insane day. Every day is more insane. Let's start out with an audio cut. This is top Biden spokesperson John Kirby.
All right.
Asked a question on intelligence. Are you examining the intelligence? How did we miss this?
Yeah.
Here we go.
John, this was a massive intelligence failure. Who bears responsibility for that?
You know something, Jackie? There's going to come a time when it's appropriate for us to take a look back retrospectively and see what the intel picture showed us or didn't show us, whether there's any gaps that need to be closed. There's going to be a time for that. And I suspect that our Israeli counterparts will do the same thing. Now's not that time.
Okay, so now is not that time.
Uh-huh.
And, all right, so now is not that time. Well, what is it yesterday? What was it the time to talk about? All right, if it's not the time to talk about, how did we miss this intelligence failure and have a discussion on it from day one.
Right.
That's what you wish to do. What would be worth talking about then? Let's go to the president yesterday.
And as we take these actions, I continue to call on Congress to pass what my friends in the front row here mostly support, the Junk Fee Prevention Act. Hard to say. Anyway, but all kidding aside.
Lowering the fees on concert tickets.
It's so refreshing that we have our head in the game. I think Netanyahu and the people of Israel can rest easy that we're on top of the important things. And I'm guessing in the next couple of days, the media will get back to the Taylor Swift coverage.
Well, not since they apparently broke up.
Did they?
That's a great... Let's delve into that. We're going to spend the next 4 hours.
Yeah. William H.
52
Macy.
minutes.
William H. Macy. No, we're not. William H. Macy should have, John Kirby, should have responded by our strongest ally, Israel, and the American people and free people all over the world should know that we're constantly reassessing intel gathering sources and methods, and that right now it is job and always has been job number one. But in that region, there is a constant reassessment, which includes now, as we look to help Israel get settled and not only go through their war, but also their grieving process. We take everything very seriously, every piece of information that we get. We look at the methods, and we're always asking, what can we do better?
Oh, I want to make this note. You heard when Kirby said Jackie, that, of course, would have been Jackie Heinrich. I did find out that was not her following Representative Tlaib yesterday.
Oh, okay.
That was Hillary Vaughn, who is Pete Ducey's wife.
Oh, okay.
All right, that changes everything.
Yeah.
I don't know Pete Ducey, but Eric and I would like to have dinner with both of them.
Well,
and just ask some questions like, so what do you guys...
Well,
what's your pillow talk like?
Pete Ducey is probably the only person at Fox News that can say, I'm with Hillary.
Yes.
Yes, and it means something special. And by the way, that whole thing where, she basically Tlaib had to come back in an interview. And by the way, why couldn't you say that then? Why couldn't you stop and say that then? Why can you not speak with conviction at any moment? We understand who she is. We understand how she thinks. But in a situation like that, it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to have to draw the line very clearly, because if our enemy believes that they have lawmakers in the U.S. that are friendly to them, and by the way, they likely do think that for good reason, then it makes us less safe.
Well, that went viral online. None of those. I was looking at Newsbusters. They said none of the networks carried that. None. You think if that was a Republican, they would have covered it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it doesn't matter anymore. I was reading something the other day that said everybody under 60, everyone gets their news from the phone. They don't get it they get it from the internet. They don't get it from TV.
Right.
It was just like the numbers are massive. Now, you're not, but I'm over 60, and I get 99, okay, I'll say 97% of my news I get from online. It's easier.
Yeah,
it's easier.
yeah.
You know, number one, you don't have to wait. Now, now YouTube, I get it from, I will get, when something happens, especially, for example, when they're all walking out of a conference, whatever, I'll watch it on YouTube.
Right.
But I know about it from being online, and YouTube is not traditional network TV.
Yeah, I've got my alerts set on every app, so every news source, including liberal media, because you want everything in what we do. You want to be able to assess not only the story, but how it's being covered. And so that's pretty much what I rely on. I mean, if I had to sit around and watch TV, we get back to the Newsbusters crew. My gosh. Seriously. These people are heroes. And
your job is to watch all of the mainstream media news reports.
It's just, yeah. We're going to need more interns. But, the whole thing is that, and I think that's where we get into the willfully ignorant, because if you're, a lot of people would say, if my phone alerts were going off like yours, and my alerts fill the page and then some several times a day.
Yeah.
And which means you've got to be careful. Now, quite unfortunately with the New York Post, half of it is about Taylor Swift or the Kardashians or something like that, but I can skim through that and swipe. But the average person, if they were looking at my phone, would probably say, yeah, no, thanks. And what that leads to, I think, is a more, a greater population of people that are willfully ignorant. And that is, we don't really want it coming at us like that. If we want it, we'll go find it. And, that's how you get to the undecided voter 3 days before the election. That's how you get to a number of people not knowing and of course, we can go back to all of our comments about public school when it comes to knowing the three branches of government and the failures in the public school system on that regard. But there is no excuse on any of it, from the very basics of our society to daily breaking news. There's no excuse for being uninformed except for the fact that you just don't want to be informed. And that's what it comes down to. The people who listen to us, it's great. I love it because you'll see it, and they're doing in many cases, they're doing the same show prep we're doing. They're following the same stories we're doing.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Which is all the major stories.
Yeah, and we'll get it, sometimes, on X they'll send us, a post, hey, did you see this? Did you see that? And I love that because it tells me that that it reminds me of who our audience is. They're sitting and, they're informed. And as a society, we should be informed. We should be informed about the border. We should be informed about how the economy runs. We should be informed as to who our enemy is. We should be informed as to why it's important to know that Afghanistan is now a terrorist superstate. And now, with Iran and the whole thing with Hamas, it is important to know the back and forth, the details, everything about that $6 billion and also their access to the world market, the global oil market to raise more money to fund terrorism.
Well, it's always important because I think the biggest story here, and I know the people that I really respect in the business are doing the exact same thing. They're focusing on the $6 billion, and not only just the $6 billion, but all the oil money that Biden has allowed to go to Iran by not enforcing, and it's federal law.
Yeah.
Federal law dictates that, we are supposed to, embargo Iranian oil.
Right.
And he has decided not to follow federal law to do it.
Right.
I think the most important story is the fact that the Biden administration, because the funding wasn't there, the massive funding wasn't there because of the federal law and the Trump administration.
Right.
Now the money is there. How did that happen?
Right.
And as you notice, they're sticklers about, well, this $6 billion, not a dime of that has been spent, and we all know that's a stupid argument because it's fungible. And the other thing is they know and believe they can spend it because they know that Joe Biden is not enforcing the oil embargo.
Right.
So they look at him and go, he's already been somebody who has given us tons of cash.
Right.
And it's really interesting because it's something that you and I wondered, and Andrew McCarthy broke it down yesterday, and he actually apologized to his National Review audience saying, I know, everything is focused on the $6 billion. I want to tell him, stop apologizing. That's the key.
No, that's
because
that's pointing that out is important.
Is it important to know that the presidential administration has been funding Hamas terrorism and Hezbollah terrorism? That it is the United States through the Biden administration that has opened up tens of billions of dollars to go to Hezbollah and go to Hamas, which then got Americans killed and kidnapped?
All this is important.
And everything. I think, to me, that's the most important part of the domestic part of the story, which is, my God, the United States under Joe Biden is ensuring that our enemies are flush with cash so they can use it against our allies and us.
Yeah. Every day, you look at their production and what they bring to the global oil market every single day. There's no telling what they'll be able to fund.
And so, but he came out and said, you know why they won't freeze it? They can't. That's a lie. The Biden administration cannot freeze it. He said, because if they could, they would have. This is such a huge negative for the Biden administration. And so what they're saying is, and it actually hurts them because they're like, oh, yeah, we can do it. We just haven't decided to do it yet. Why not?
Right.
Because that position is a horrible position. Well, we could do it, but we haven't decided to do it yet. What are you talking about? And he says, they're lying. They can't. They can't do it. It's in Qatar's hand. They would have to ask Qatar to give it back to the United States, or give it back, refreeze it again, because this is actually South Korean oil money.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point, because that was part of the exchange for the hostages.
Exactly.
Is setting it up essentially where the U.S. didn't have control of it at that point.
Yeah, we don't have control of it. He would have to ask Iran and Qatar to do it, and if both would refuse, as he made the point, and then he'd be embarrassed and he'd be shown up. So they're in delay here. They know, according to Andrew McCarthy, they know they're lying. They cannot freeze the $6 billion, and they're pretending like, oh, this is our choice, and it's like, well, because that question was asked the other day to Kirby. If not now, when?
Right.
If you don't freeze it now, when would you freeze it?
Right.
Americans are dead.
Right.
Americans are being held hostage.
Right.
And you're not freezing it? So we'll get to that coming up and a whole bunch more. We got a great show ahead. Who might be speaker and who might not be speaker, and will there be a speaker, a permanent speaker?
Right.
That and more coming up, and some polling on illegal immigration, and it's the fact that on so many of these protests, I saw an article. So many of these protests that are happening for the pro-Hamas people, they're all wearing masks, and it's not because of COVID. 866-90-RED-EYE.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
This preventative maintenance tip is brought to you by Hot Shot Secret, the country's #1 fastest growing oil and additive company. If you've been driving a diesel any length of time, you know diesel fuel quality can be an issue. There are U.S. standards that diesel fuel is supposed to meet, like cetane number, lubricity, aka wear protection, deposit control. But oftentimes the fuel at the pump falls short. Let's highlight diesel fuel's lubricity. Diesel fuel in the United States must have enough lubricity so the fuel does not produce a wear scar greater than 520 microns. Without the proper lubrication, you run the risk of fuel pump and injector failures. This is why a premium additive is needed to keep lubricity levels in spec, to keep the fuel system protected and avoid costly repairs and downtime. Add Hot Shot Secret Everyday Diesel Treatment, a 6-in-1 fuel booster at every fill-up to keep your fuel's lubricity within specification of U.S. standards, and the Engine Manufacturers Association's recommendation for lubricity to keep your fuel system protected. Learn more about the science behind diesel fuel and Hot Shot Secret's Everyday Diesel Treatment at hotshotsecret.com.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up on the bottom of the hour, how John Kirby is helping the opposition connect the dots.
Yeah.
He's out there yesterday talking about, well, we all know that Iran, for the longest time, has been helping Hamas. We know they've been funding Hamas for the longest time.
Yeah.
Well, then you look like an idiot because, they're trying to sit there and just say it's the $6 billion, that Qatar has right now.
Right.
And it's not.
No.
It's again, not enforcing the oil embargo on Iran after the Trump administration, which is, I don't know, what is it? What could have that been? $30 billion, $40 billion over that time period?
Right.
Because we already knew it. I mean, the fact is they couldn't hide it because in their last international terrorism report from the White House, they admitted that, Iran funds Hamas over $100 million. Hezbollah gets $700 million, they believe.
Right.
And so we all know they're a part of it. There's no connection between the fact that we are the ones that were responsible for making Iran flush with cash. Our administration, we did it, but there's no correlation because there's no direct evidence that the serial number of that particular dollar, and this is what Matt Lee yesterday was bringing up the State Department.
Stupid.
Their argument is we haven't traced us any dollar that has a particular serial number that went from Iran to Hamas.
It's not how it works, and you know it.
Yeah.
And those are the things that that are very frustrating right now. And I don't know on the messaging. I don't know how they turn this around.
I don't think they can. It's only going in one direction. You can't win this
because Israel is at war. This really is just beginning for Israel, and yet we're still setting the embargo aside, dismissing federal law to do it, to make sure that Iran is funded properly so that Hamas has everything they need to fight Israel. That's just maddening.
I know.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So according to Andrew McCarthy, National Review, you've seen him on Fox, and he's everywhere. I think his columns are in the New York Post, too. Contrary to what Biden officials say, they know they can't refreeze the $6 billion.
Right.
That's a lie. And that's the thing here, because we went through this with Afghanistan when Americans were killed.
Mm-hmm.
They lied.
Yep.
Biden lied consistently, and now the same thing is happening now. And the media, I believe, is not investigating it as thoroughly as they should, because that's the story. That the domestic story is, if you ask in the question form, did the United States over the last couple of years during the Biden administration allow Iran to be flush with cash because they changed U.S. policy towards the oil embargo? And then you can sit there and say, okay, well, that changes completely, because if there's a pattern of us making sure that Iran has money, well, then, hey, Iran looks at this $6 billion and says,
yeah,
okay, fine. But can they refreeze it? Andrew McCarthy says no. And then he writes, at the risk of trying our readers' patience, see here. Because I'm again banging away at the $6 billion. But I think it's important that we bang away at the $6 billion in order to get to the truth of it. And he says, the Biden administration here, let me get to this here. The bottom line, contrary to what Biden officials are saying, they know they cannot refreeze the funds. They're lying about that.
Yeah.
He won't say it. I'll say it. Mm-hmm. They're lying about it. After all, if they could, they would.
Yep.
Iran, a designated state sponsor of terrorism under federal law for nearly 40 years, backs Hamas and patently was complicit in the October 7th atrocities, in which, quite apart from the massively murdering and savaging Israelis, Hamas killed at least 22 Americans, with at least 17 other Americans missing and likely either killed or taken hostage, along with scores of abducted Israelis. Even before Saturday, there were sanctions in place that the Biden administration purports to be enforcing, clearly then giving the political heat the president is feeling for putting $6 billion at Iran's disposal shortly before its proxies slaughtered our citizens and allies. If he could freeze the funds, he would. But I don't think the fallback position of saying, oh, yeah, we could freeze it, but we're not yet. I think that's a horrible position to be in.
Well, because eventually it's going to be found out, because I understand why they tried to lie about it, because, number one, Joe Biden lies about everything. But if you're in this situation, you see everything that we criticize them about with unfreezing that money has now come to fruition at the front lines between Hamas and Israel. And what are you going to say? Well, we don't actually have access to those funds anymore. We would have to go and ask permission to freeze those funds. We don't control those funds the way we did before we unfroze them.
Well, that's why the Republicans in the Senate, I think that probably you're going to get Democrats aboard. You may be able to get the Democrat votes. The Republicans in the Senate want legislation to freeze the $6 billion.
Yeah.
They probably know he can't.
Right.
That's why they're putting the legislation through.
Right.
So officially,
to force him to say he can't.
So officially, to say, well, I can't, and then they've got him in the lie.
Right.
He can't. This is from Andrew McCarthy. He can't because he lost his leverage when he waived the sanctions and transferred the funds to Iran's ally, Qatar. He'd need Qatar's agreement to freeze the funds. It's so certain that Qatar would not consent that Biden won't even ask, because in this moment, being rebuffed would be too humiliating. So the administration has come up with a fairy tale. Well, we could freeze if we decided to, but there's no need to, because Iran hasn't touched the money, and we can't confirm that Iran was involved in October 7th anyway. They have to say confirmed because the evidence is too overwhelming for even Biden to pretend there isn't any.
Yeah.
Biden isn't confirming Iran's role because if he did, he'd be expected to do something about it, and he's not asking Qatar to freeze funds because if he did, he'd be expected to do something about it when they turned him down flat.
Mm-hmm.
So they just lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Americans are killed,
Mm-hmm.
and this administration, again, is lying to cover their posterior.
Yep.
Like you, I want to use, it's you said a couple days ago, I said, almost a curse word comes out because it's so infuriating. It's so infuriating the way that they're lying to the American public.
It is.
And obfuscating and not letting, and because they have to, because it looks terrible. It absolutely looks terrible.
And if they were to tell the truth, it would look bad. It would also look bad because it would prove everything that we were talking about in terms of releasing those funds to Iran.
The $6 billion at issue was generated by Iranian oil sales to South Korea. The United States was able to freeze the funds because South Korea honors our anti-Iran sanctions when we enforce them, as the Trump administration aggressively did. The funds were frozen by the South Korean government until Biden issued a formal waiver on September 11th. Think about this. On September 11th of 2023.
Yeah.
You can't make this up.
No,
you cannot make this up.
In the world of screw-ups, in the world of mishandling, in the world of being completely and totally incompetent, there is nobody that stands above Joe Biden.
The Biden administration claims it has the authority to refreeze the funds. This position was initially staked out by State Department spokesman Matt Miller at the time of the transfer and has been reiterated in the past 2 days by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and also Kirby has said it.
Mm-hmm.
According to Biden officials, the funds are never to be directly in the Iranian regime's possession. Rather, as needed, Iran is to alert Qatar that portions of the funds should be dispersed directly to third parties. But there is no, as they say, there's no clawback agreement in this at all.
Well, and
it's like, okay, will you do this? Yeah, okay.
Well, and to that end, then the U.S. can't insist that they give their blessing and guide those funds when they are requested for use. When there's a request for use for those funds, if the U.S. can't, if there's no clawback clause here, then there is no enforcement by the U.S. as to how those funds are going to be used. And it goes back to what the regime said in Iran: we'll use those funds however we want to.
And he points this out, and he says the administration further claims that U.S. monitors will eye the funds transaction by transaction if Iran were to try diverting any of the $6 billion to unapproved purposes. Biden officials insist the money could be instantly refrozen. Tellingly, they have declined to discuss what the mechanism for that would be because there is no mechanism.
There isn't.
According to Andrew McCarthy, the administration is lying.
Right. The money is as good as being in Iran's central bank.
Yeah. And so you can look at the $6 billion, but when you look at the $6 billion in context of after the Trump administration enforcing the sanctions on Iranian oil, and then then Biden coming in and reversing it, and you have seen the amount of money Biden is responsible for ensuring that Iran is flush with cash from oil sales because he will not enforce the federal law that exists right now.
He's going out of his way, setting federal law aside so that Iran can be well funded and have plenty to fund terrorists with.
And then the funding, then the funding goes for terrorism. The Terrorist Act happens. Then the United States has to use taxpayer dollars to go in and support Israel for a situation that the Biden administration funded to begin with that ended up getting Americans killed
Yeah.
and taken hostage.
Yeah.
You can't win that. And that's why they're sticking with that one talking point over and over again. Not 1 cent of that $6 billion. Do they even know that? Is that a lie? Do they know that? He doesn't get into that.
Well, tell me how they would know that. Yeah. Because if there is no clawback mechanism in that, then tell me how they would have that access to those funds in monitoring those funds and the flow of that money. I'm confident, as pointed out here by Andrew McCarthy, I'm confident that they don't have a mechanism for monitoring.
And talks about the reality that America has to confront, that, both Qatar, Turkey, and Iran play both sides of the game, with presidential administrations.
Right, of course.
In Qatar, we have military bases. So,
Yep.
We have military bases in a strategic location. But as he said, he goes, Qatar works against our best interest all the time.
All the time.
And also funds, also sends money to fund terrorism.
Right,
So, in essence, if we have bases that we pay for,
right,
then that money is also going to fund terrorism.
Right.
This is something I think most Americans, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest in America. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. To me, this is the key of the entire thing domestically. This is the number one thing, because I don't see how you can make the argument that the Biden administration, starting with Obama playing the big fool with the Iranian nuclear deal, complete big fool.
Yeah.
Oh, Obama, he's worldly. He's an idiot.
Well, at least he did something. Yeah, he did something, and now we're looking at it.
Yeah. And then with Biden in there, bumbling and stumbling. And then yesterday, when I flicked on, it was on YouTube, and I said, okay, here's part of him speaking. And when he's talking about junk fees yesterday, I just had to turn it off. I'm just so angry, so infuriated. Americans get killed. They don't give a damn. They don't give a damn.
They don't care.
All they do, because they're lying about everything. They're lying about everything again. And I wish I wish the press corps would get a little bit tougher. Maybe we can have our disagreements of where we should spend taxpayer dollars. Maybe we can have our disagreements about debt. But Democrats, do you really think that an administration should be challenged when they're the ones that enable Iran to be flush with funds when we can stop it, and did stop it, and we ensure, the Biden administration ensure that they're flush with oil money, which then was used to attack, to commit a terrorist attack against Israel, commit the most heinous crimes even against children, and kill Americans. It's like, oh, whatever. Oh, okay.
American families and Israeli families are grieving, and he's talking about junk fees.
Yeah. I was so angry when I saw that.
If anybody on my, it would be cancel everything like this. I won't be talking to anybody about junk fees and concert ticket prices. Right now, all hands on deck for the situation in Israel. Full stop until I say otherwise.
Never underestimate
the ability of Joe Biden to F things up. And I mean in a whole new way. Yeah. I would not even imagine you could go this far in screwing things up. But Joe Biden can.
If you want to get in, we have a line open, 866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Then that's the one thing, though. Their lie is horrible.
Yeah.
the lie that,
Right.
well, we could refreeze it, but we just chosen not to.
Yeah.
And you've got Americans
Yeah.
going, well, if you can, well, then you should do it.
That's what you should be doing.
Right. And that's the whole point. And nobody really addressed that specific point except Andrew McCarthy. I
Right.
haven't seen anybody else address that, saying, you know something? They're lying. Because they would freeze it if they could.
If they could, they would.
Because the political pressure is unbelievable. And the lie is so horrible. Well, we could refreeze it, but, we just we haven't made any. Because Kirby said that yesterday. Remember? He was like, we haven't made any decision on that at this point.
Right.
Well, when are you going to make a decision on
Right.
it? What would it take?
How would it not be right away?
Right. Because they can't
Because
do
they
it.
actually can't do it.
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. We are Red Eye Radio. Just reading here from more of Andrew McCarthy's column, which is great, and I do think that domestically, what we do and what our plans are for the future for supporting Israel and everything else is, I'm sure, going to be discussed. But domestically, you look at it, and I say domestically because you look at the president and you look at the administration, you look at the fact that it's the administration is the reason. This administration is the reason, without question. Now, you may sit there and say, well, they're trying to become friends with Iran or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the money was to get the hostages back. You're not going to win that.
No.
You're not going to win that because this isn't like this started yesterday.
Right.
This has been 40 years.
Yeah.
And so, but the Iran sanctions, as we know, the oil sanctions, Trump enforced. Biden did not. That's the reason. It's the oil money. You heard Kirby, we put on 400 other sanctions. Mm-hmm. And what were they?
Yeah.
Okay, the 400 other sanctions. Give me a list of what they were, and then let's look at where the real money is, which is the oil. Mm-hmm. And the oil, you let them acquire tens of billions of dollars that they can use to fund terrorism.
And there's no way around those facts that you just laid out. There's no way around it. There's no way to correct this, because if there is no clawback mechanism on that $6 billion, then that tells me there's also no way to monitor how those funds are used, and at the very least, no way to enforce the use of those funds if they're used for other purposes. Iran said it. We're going to use them how we want to use them.
When Biden officials claim that they can refreeze the funds, what they'd have us imagine is if Qatar releases some of the money at Iran's direction, and then Iran is detected diverting the money in some way that would violate some sanction, presumably the one that Biden hasn't already waived, the administration could then ask Qatar to freeze the rest of the money, to decline further Iranian disbursement directives. But would Qatar comply with such a Biden request? Dream on.
Yeah.
Again, the $6 billion that Biden put at Iran's disposal is a growing scandal after this weekend's atrocities, which now include Americans murdered and taken hostage. Any sensible president who actually had the power to freeze the funds would have frozen them by now. Enriching Iran was brainless, but denying it riches would be a no-brainer.
Well, you think about that, that statement that any president would freeze them if they could have by now. Because freezing those funds is not a permanent act. There are a couple of things that effectively you can say, all right, you're not, whatever you're going to use, you're not going to use these funds to fund Hamas. But ultimately, long term, if you say, well, that's only going to bring more scorn from the Iranian government, well, again, if it's not a permanent act, freezing those funds would have been one of the first things you did even before enforcing the embargo. The embargo is what really cripples them. And by the way, that is something they can do.
And when we talk about, for example, the whole climate change crap, because it comes into effect here,
right?
And the where we're going with the grid and where we're going with EVs and fossil fuels and all this, it all you notice when we've often talked about this, we have said that the Biden administration and the Democrats, the left, wishes to hurt our economic security, our energy security, and our national security. These couple of sentences here from Andrew McCarthy sort of gets to that particular point. Said again, the $6 billion that Biden put at Iran's disposal is a growing scandal after this week's atrocities. Okay, I just read that one. Biden is not trying to freeze the money since he knows Qatar would not agree to do it. Qatar is a Sharia supremacist regime. It is not going to rupture its relationship with an allied Sharia supremacist regime just because the American government is embarrassed. Notice that immediately after Hamas's barbarous weekend attacks, Qatar joined Iran in publicly blaming Israel. Understand who the intermediary is there.
Right.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs holds Israel alone responsible for the current escalation due to the ongoing violations of rights of the Palestinian people. That's the official statement from Qatar. Moreover, and this is where we get to everything, this is where we get to the complete heaping, steaming pile.
Yeah.
Moreover, the regime in Qatar holds heavy leverage in dealing with Biden, besides needing it to continue allowing American forces to station there. Biden is relying on Qatar to help meet the energy needs of Europe, which is largely cut off from Russian supplies because of the Ukraine war. If Biden tried to ramp up American fossil fuel production for that purpose, his climate alarmist political base would revolt. More to the point, Biden is hoping that Qatar will use its influence with Iran and Hamas to negotiate the release of American and Israeli hostages abducted by the jihadists from Israel over the weekend. That is plainly why Biden officials are trying to bluster their way, we'll say it in a different way, lie their way through Republican and media questions about the $6 billion. Regardless of how hard they are pressed, administration flacks will keep repeating their horrible talking points. Well, in theory, we could refreeze the funds if we wanted to, but why should we when Iran hasn't touched the money? And ergo, we can rest assured it is not being used to fund terrorism. Mind you, this is all nonsense anyway, because money is fungible. Once the Iranian regime knew it was there, on deposit with Qatar for the regime's benefit, Iran was free to divert to terrorism promotion and other funds it would have spent on legitimate governmental purposes. Later, it can direct Qatar to disperse some or all of the $6 billion for those humanitarian purposes. You know, it's the whole thing. You saw that the Wall Street Journal had the editorial of the Hamas leader who said, look, for the last couple of years, all we've done is pretend that we care about the Palestinians and that we were involved in governing and providing to them and the economic stuff. And this is a Hamas leader, and it was all a lie.
Right.
We were just trying, to make it so Israel didn't think we were going to do anything. But all the time, our only goal was basically propaganda to the Israelis that we are now carrying individuals, and all we wanted to do was kill Jews.
Yep.
And that's from the Hamas leader.
Right.
So,
well, they were building their Trojan horse of an image. We're just here to help the Palestinian people.
And I can see in the upcoming weeks when finally, because the Republicans in the Senate now are want to have legislation to freeze the $6 billion, and they're doing it on purpose because I think they probably understand you can't freeze it.
Right.
You can't freeze it now.
Right.
It's in the, and so they want to expose the Biden lie on that one. And then I can hear the Biden administration. Well, we trusted Iran for this.
Mm-hmm.
We trusted Qatar. We trusted Iran.
Right.
And we look even more foolish.
Right. And,
but the thing is, it's the entire package. It's everything from the oil embargo since he's taken office, not enforcing the oil embargo, which has put tens of billions of dollars into Iranian coffers from oil because Trump said, nope, you're not going to do it. And they didn't do it. And their capital, what was it down to? Like $4 billion, I think somebody was saying the other day.
Yeah, right.
And now it's up to 30, 40, 50 billion.
Right.
Well, that money can now be spent for terrorism. And it was.
Yeah.
And so this can only go one way. It can't go any other way. They're not going to win this.
And I don't see them enforcing the embargo. My question would be, is there anything that forces them to enforce it?
Well, you would have enforced it now. Americans are dead.
Certainly.
They're hostages.
Certainly those who are capable would. But is there anything from this point on that would enforce them to do it?
No.
I don't see anything. I don't see anything.
Look, they did it in the first. I mean, you have to answer the question, why did the Biden administration change the policy of Trump to enrich Iran?
Right.
Until you can get Biden to answer that question, and he never will, you don't know. Because the buck stops with him. He made the decision. Why would Biden open up the door of cash to Iran? What is the reason that he would do that? Can any Democrat answer that question? And it's completely separate from the $6 billion, but the Democrats and the administration is trying to just focus on it's only the $6 billion and ignoring all the money that's gone in because of the oil embargo. As was pointed out the other day, they're treating us like idiots, as McCarthy said. Well, they think the American public is idiot. They think the American public are complete idiots and can't put it together.
Right. Well, supply and demand, Gary.
Oh, my God.
We can't enforce the embargo because, supply and demand. Wow.
Well, he's admitting what we said then. They're actually, when you read through it, admitting the truth. And that supply and demand thing was, oil prices will go up and gasoline will go up if we don't allow them to, put their oil on the world market. So that, because you and I talked about it yesterday when Kirby said that, we said, my God, he is saying, we need to take the chance that Israel will be attacked and Americans will die and will be taken hostage because we need to keep oil prices down, but we won't drill here. We'll do everything to stop it here.
Right. And Iran can keep increasing their production.
Right. That's their argument. Do they even realize where they're going? And we got a couple audio cuts more coming up from Kirby where you're just like, dude, they have nowhere to go. And they're making it worse. They're making it easier for the public to connect the dots.
No, they are.
And we'll have this audio coming up.
Yeah, they are.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Surviving and thriving as an owner-operator has just as much to do with managing costs as it does with generating revenue. Like the chief financial officer of any company, you have to be concerned about rising costs, especially without increases in revenue. Trying to reduce costs, let alone make sense of them, can be a complicated task. Understanding basic principles of operating costs can save you thousands of dollars a year. A penny saved could be $1,000 earned. Saving just 1 penny per mile over 100,000 miles driven annually will deliver $1,000 to the bottom line at the end of the year. Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Let's go to Mike in Boise. Idaho. Mike, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
How you doing, guys?
Very good. What's up?
Hey, on your information at that article Andy wrote about the money, if it's all a big hoax and a lie, what about they keep touting whenever they come on and talk to the media that the money is just to be used for food and medicine? So that's a big lie too, isn't it? The whole thing's probably a
Well,
lie.
and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, Mike. I don't if there is no method to refreeze this money, then there is no method to enforce the use of that money either. That's what it tells me.
Well, I'll say this: they used that when during the hostage negotiations, they were promoting. You know, when they announced the $6 billion, they announced it only go to humanitarian, and that's when the Iranian leader came out and said, "Absolutely not. We'll use it for whatever we want to use it."
Yeah, right.
So you knew at that point that was the spin that the administration was putting on, because it wouldn't have been accepted any other way, except and so what you're and that's why, you know, what is the process to claw back to get the money back if they don't do it? And as Andrew McCarthy's saying, there isn't any. And that's where the lie is.
And
that's
I
that's
think you're
where the
right,
lie
Mike.
is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know, because look, in the wake of an atrocity, you look at what has happened. What is still happening? This is the thing. This war is ongoing.
Yeah.
And the slaughter of babies, the raping of women, all of the atrocities that are laid out for the world to see. Any American president would do everything within their grasp to stop this and control it. If for no other reason than to be greatly concerned about your polling numbers. What I'm wondering what the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, I wonder what are the conversations that are being had between the Democratic lawmakers and this administration? What are the concerns, the real concerns here? Because it's going to fall on the party it already has. There's no way to fix this misstep by the Biden administration. There just isn't. He's incapable. But my God, anybody, especially somebody that's been in the Beltway and been in public office all of his adult life, would know there are moves you can make so that you gain the confidence. And he is incapable. He doesn't care. And also, there are things now that he has thrown out of his reach. And it's likely that $6 billion. There's and like I said, there's one thing he can do. He can enforce the embargo on oil. He can cut them off from the world market, and he's not going to do it.
No. Here from the Wall Street Journal, the Journal has reported that Iran gave the approval for Hamas's bloody assault at an October 2nd meeting in Beirut. If the Wall Street Journal knows that, how doesn't the CIA?
Right.
How did the Wall Street Journal find that out, and the administration is still saying we have no evidence of that?
Well, does it go back to...
They've not retracted. The Wall Street Journal hasn't retracted it.
Right.
The Iran Supreme Leader has denied it, and the U.S. is saying it has no specific evidence of Iran's assent. But Iran has long been the chief benefactor of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Shiite militias in Iraq and Yemen. All have praised the Hamas assault. This is what Iran sends Hamas guns and money to do. Hamas killed at least 22 Americans in the attack at last count, and others are now captives. Mr. Biden has a duty to get them home and avenge those deaths. This is Wall Street Journal editorial.
Yeah.
It's implausible that Hamas would have struck without Iran's approval. Knowing Israel's response would be devastating. One question is whether the massacres were part of a deliberate strategy to court such a response. An Israeli ground assault could be the excuse for Hezbollah to open up a second front in Israel's north. Hezbollah receives an estimated $700 million a year from Iran, and its missile stockpile runs at 100,000 or more, with greater accuracy than rockets fired from Gaza. They could target most of Israel. A Hezbollah attack would also require Iran's approval. Mr. Biden on Tuesday warned unnamed countries not to take advantage of the war in Gaza, and his deployment of a carrier group in the Eastern Mediterranean is a useful show of support, but the question is whether Iran will believe this attempt at deterrence after Mr. Biden's behavior over the past 3 years. And that's where you get to it. And they talk about the oil sales and the embargo and everything else. Iran, if you look at the leadership, has to look at it and go, Biden's a sucker. He's arming us. He's not going to.
Exactly. We're running the show.
Us.
On your smart speaker, say, play Red Eye Radio. And, if you're really nice, she might. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara, 86690 Red Eye. Don't forget that you can download our Red Eye Radio app if you haven't already. Many of you have, and we really appreciate it. You can listen when and where you want if you cannot listen live overnight. All right, let's play a couple of these audio cuts. And this is, and again, we were thinking about this yesterday, and we said they can't win this argument. You read Andrew McCarthy's column today. He goes, they're lying about the $6 billion. They can't freeze it. They're lying about it. Mm-hmm. And so you just look and you say, okay, and we had mentioned this yesterday. I mentioned this to you. I said, is there no central leader? Do they all just go out there and say what they think they should say?
It seems like they're untethered.
Because we have talked about how John Kirby at times has just what was it, about a year ago, where we said, oh, okay, when he wasn't speaking a lot, we said, oh, he might be better than Karine Jean-Pierre. They need to put him in there.
Oh, my gosh.
My God, were we
Horrible
wrong.
mistake.
But just so you know, if you think we never say that we're wrong, we were wrong.
Oh, yeah.
He's horrible.
Clearly wrong about that.
But some of the things that he's done to actually make the argument against Biden, and two things that he said yesterday. Okay, and this is on Hamas and the relationship with Iran. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Hamas wouldn't have been able to function at all had it not been for propping up by the Iranian regime. But
so he says that. Then here's this next statement. Here we go.
Even if there's no direct evidence linking Iran to this specific attack right now, does the U.S. believe Iran needs to pay some kind of a price or be some kind of retribution for having supported Hamas all along up to this point?
I mean, the question almost, and I'm not picking on you, Ed, but it implies that that we're just now waking up to the fact that they've been supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist networks. That Hamas is one of the most highly sanctioned terrorist networks on the planet.
It implies that we're now just waking up to the fact that they've been supporting Hamas. Well, you've been supporting Hamas,
and you still are
with the oil embargo, with not enforcing the oil embargo. And this is where Kirby, this is where you and I were talking about this yesterday on the air and off the air. It's like, isn't there a central clearing place in the Biden administration to say, well, you can't go there, because if you go there and say, no, we've known all along that Iran is supporting Hamas, then you look terrible for taking off the sanctions on Iranian oil that has made them flush with cash. And the fact that you would then knowingly, 2020 hindsight, look at doing that and what a mistake that was, knowing that they support Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist groups around the country, then the $6 billion even looks worse when put into context with all of the support that the Biden administration has given Iran. And I've said this to a few people. I've said, because it feels like part of me says an administration can't be this stupid. So have I dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's? Am I missing something here? You have those thoughts because you're like, this is mind-boggling insane.
If I'm chief of staff, everybody is before me every single morning. You know the talking points. You know what you can and can't say. You know what to expect in terms of questions. And here's where you go and don't go. Karine Jean-Pierre, you have a book. Stick to the book.
But when you make all the wrong decisions and lie consistently, is there any way when you've got 5 or 6 people out there speaking for the administration every day, is there any way that you can actually keep it all together?
No.
No.
No, not with someone who is a wholly dishonest person, Joe Biden. Because you don't know what he's going to say. This is why they don't put him out there. They can't put him in front of the media ever. You can't do that. If you're the campaign manager or if you're any of his handlers, you have to know you cannot put him in front of the media. Their only option is for him to, and this is horrible, for him to turn his back and walk away.
And not only that, but yesterday, whose bright idea, imagine you're sitting around the table with all the president's aides. All right, more Americans now are killed. We're over 20. Mm-hmm. 17 are at least missing. We don't know how many are hostages.
Right.
We don't know how many are missing or killed, but we know there are hostages there.
Right.
So what's the president going to talk about today? Well, generally, he can just sort of mention Iran and just tell them, to watch out, not get involved in it whatsoever.
Yeah, be careful.
Because we need to keep that separation. Mm-hmm. We need to focus in on Hamas and not Iran at all.
Right.
But you can tell Iran to watch out, and then you can say, well, the president, he covered Iran. He told them to watch out.
Yeah.
You may hear that today.
Right.
And then somebody says, well, look, let's try to deflect off the horrible scenes there because we can't defend what we've been doing with with enriching Iran like we have as an administration. So what can we do today? Oh, yeah, let's bring back up the proposed junk fees for concert tickets, the extra fees for concert tickets and sports tickets. Mr. President, get out and talk about that today. A day after where the biggest news is the decapitation of babies in front of their parents.
It's
before they killed their parents.
It's so frustrating and far beyond embarrassing. It's just an embarrassment to the entire world. He's on the global stage because the events in Israel put him there, and every U.S. president would be in that position, and the spotlight is on you. And then you mumble your way through something about concert ticket prices?
Yeah.
That's something, by the way, that's something.
Look, Carter was a horrible president, but he presented himself better.
Well,
and that's saying a lot.
It's funny that you say that because I was going to say that's something that even a former president wouldn't do as a former president. George W. Bush sitting there with Bill Clinton. Listen, we're going to get together, as former presidents, and we're going to campaign to bring concert ticket prices down. And that's not even something you would do as a former president.
But I mean,
and in the wake, in the days after the atrocities in Israel, that's what he is on. That's a priority. That is something that they made time and kept the appointment for in his schedule.
And then, he was also talking about how horrible the economy is. How 61% of people are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And at the other end, the economy's great.
Right.
I mean, they just can't he can't get it together. He's all over the place.
This is why anybody speaking for him is all over the place, and they are untethered because he's not tethered. He's not together. His mind isn't working properly, and he's a wholly dishonest person. He is a liar to the bone.
This is going to blow up. The $6 billion is going to blow up because they're going to get caught. with the I got to find the story of the Republicans in the Senate. I don't know if I printed it or
Well,
not. But
and
the Republicans in the Senate, and then as soon as I saw that the Republicans in the Senate are going to look to put through legislation to freeze it. Well, which Democrat isn't going to sign on to that? You have the votes,
right?
And then it comes the administration. Well, we really don't have the ability.
And it doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what Kirby says or anybody says at the White House. How does the Wall Street Journal know about what Iran did and gave their blessing for on October 2nd at the meeting in Beirut, and the president not know? You can't convince me of that. I don't care who you are. You can't convince me that the Wall Street Journal knew that and learned it, and the president of the United States didn't learn the same. There's no way that happened. That means they knew. That means they knew far ahead, days in advance. There's no way to convince me that the Wall Street Journal knew it and the president
Yeah, but the
didn't.
Wall Street Journal did not know in advance.
No.
They knew after the terrorist attack.
But what I'm saying is the administration knew in advance.
Yeah, I don't know. I won't make that claim. I don't know if they did.
There's no way they didn't.
Yeah, I can't.
There's no way the intel didn't tell them.
Yeah, I can't make that claim.
I'm saying you can't convince me
Okay.
otherwise. I'm pretty damn sure about it.
Because then at that point, you'd be saying that the United States knew. Then did Israel know and not defend themselves? Or did the administration not
Or did
tell
the
it?
administration sit on it? Is it
Yeah.
something that Joe Biden simply doesn't care about?
Yeah.
Or are we back to the Obama game, intel versus policy, that they're changing the nature of the intel by the time the president receives it?
Yeah.
For plausible
I'll
deniability.
I'll stick with this point. The fact that the Wall Street Journal knew afterwards and knows when the meeting took place and who was part of the meeting, and the because the next thing you do is you'd go to the Wall Street Journal and you just say, could you lead us in the right direction? Right?
Yeah. Right.
And the Wall Street Journal probably would say, okay, we're not going to give you our sources, but here's what happened, when it happened.
Yeah, there's no
whatever.
way it eventually made to the media, but didn't make the president's desk ahead of time.
Right.
I refuse to believe that. Or the intel was changed to whatever the reason that they were doing it during the Obama years. You can bet they're probably doing it for this president too. If they're changing the nature of the intel before it reaches the president's desk, as was reported about Barack Obama. Or did the administration hear it and say, we're not going to do anything about it? The lazy approach of Joe Biden.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I do ask the question, how did the Wall Street Journal find out? And the administration is still claiming complete ignorance of any tie to it. I don't buy that. Andrew McCarthy doesn't buy that one.
There's just no way to convince me that happened, because there is something very wrong, and it feels at this point deliberate.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Carly, and I'm Gary McNamara. Just reading this here from CNN. Peter Bergen, CNN national security analyst. The best way to resolve the Hamas hostage crisis. Listen to this. The Hamas has threatened to execute hostages and broadcast video of the execution if Israel strikes targets in Gaza without warning. Well, that's already happened. The approach with the likely lowest risk to the hostages is a negotiated release. Few governments have power or leverage with Hamas, but Qatar does. as it has provided hundreds of millions of dollars to poor families in Gaza in recent years. Qatar also has a track record of brokering such releases. For instance, last month, Qatari officials helped to secure the release of 5 American prisoners held by Iran, which included $6 billion in Iranian oil reserves revenues be unfrozen and then sent to a Qatari bank to be used for humanitarian purposes in Iran. Already, Qatari officials are in communication with Hamas about what a deal could be made to release the hostages they are holding. What an idiot!
Yeah, I
as if that was
day one.
If that was a good deal that was done,
right. No, yeah, right. This is basically applauding the deal.
Right, exactly.
Because then you would ask, well, what is the ask this time then?
Right.
What would Hamas be asking for? It has been the MO of Hamas to essentially embed their operatives and their operations inside civilian communities in Gaza so that they could basically hide behind civilians. Now they have hostages. And the question would be, all right, what is the ask? Is the ask, basically the deal is, we're going to hold these hostages indefinitely, and the agreement is Israel doesn't attack? Well, that deal's already off. So then, what are you going to ask for? Money? Because you're dealing with Hamas. You're not dealing with Qatar. They may broker a deal, but ultimately the ask is from Hamas.
Yeah.
What are you going to give them?
Well, the Biden administration announced today that Hamas would be willing to release the hostages if we release some of their terrorists and give them a small suitcase nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
The Biden administration
Why
said
not,
it would be
right?
used, the bomb would be used for mostly peaceful purposes.
Humanitarian purposes only.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the world, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Now, this is a way, if you're a Democrat, you should answer this question.
Yeah?
He's lying, but it's the way that you answer the question.
Okay.
And
right.
This is Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin being interviewed by C-SPAN. All right.
Oh, okay.
So here we go.
A couple of your colleagues have called for a ceasefire, called for de-escalation, referred to Israel as an apartheid state. Do you think Democrats are unified in their support for Israel?
Yeah, we're absolutely unified behind Israel's right to exist and Israel's right to defend itself, and we'll be standing strong with Israel.
What do you make of the comments from your colleagues that sort of indicate otherwise?
Well, I haven't seen any of those.
I'm looking away. I'm putting blinders on during those times.
He's lying.
Of course he is.
Of course he's seen him. We've all seen him.
Yeah. You're fully aware. And
you know the interesting thing, the other thing that is just, and this thing is just heating up now, getting Americans out.
Yeah.
And you've got everybody on that talking point.
Yeah.
Well, take a commercial flight, or maybe you can, find a land route out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, all the commercial flights have been canceled. It's really bad. I mean, they're not getting anything right.
Well, you said it. I think you said it off the air yesterday or day before during the show, and we were talking about this during a mid-show meeting. And you said something to the effect of, they're likely also afraid of the scenario like we had in Afghanistan, because you have people that right now are very desperate to get out. And they don't want that scenario playing out. Now, it likely wouldn't be the exact same as that scenario on the ground in Afghanistan.
No, but you'd have people inside the terminals
exactly.
at the airports, just
desperate to get out.
Desperate to get out.
And
they don't want that. Yeah.
And, it's they would be vulnerable because the enemy would know that they're there. They would, and I don't know. I don't know how you feel in that zone. If you're in that zone right now, I don't know how you feel secure. I don't know how in the world you can go to sleep at night and feel secure to begin with. But you would be in that scenario. You'd be sitting and waiting desperately on whatever they would do. There's not a fix for this. The U.S. involvement here, there is no fix for this. I don't know what measurement or what measures Congress can take to force the Biden hand to do something, but it's going to, if that were the case, or if that is to be the case, it's going to require Democrats on board. If the Senate does move on refreezing those funds, it's likely because they're trying to force the hand of the administration to admit that they don't have the access or the ability to freeze those funds.
Here it is from the Hill. You had Mitch McConnell and Senator Tom Cotton on Wednesday unveiled legislation to immediately freeze $6 billion in Iranian funds that have been held in South Korea but are due to flow back to Iran because of the prisoner exchange deal with the United States. Okay, I don't know if they got it right. I mean, actually, Qatar has the funds.
Yeah, that's what all the other
bipartisan pushback in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
McConnell and Cotton say they will seek unanimous consent to pass legislation to block Iran from accessing the $6 billion in funds. Well, if we can't block Iran, as Andrew McCarthy is saying, we can't freeze the funds. Qatar has them. Is this the Republicans' way of getting the administration to admit they're lying?
Right. Because at the very least, you force the hand of the administration to do something about it, and then if you actually can't get to that point, then you demonstrate that the administration is lying.
You could get the votes. Latest Democrat to call for freezing, Brown of Ohio, Senator Brown, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. All you need is one or two votes.
Yeah,
that's all you need. You're going to get Republicans that say do it, and I think you probably get majority of Democrats, and then the House would do it. And then why
would you vote against that? Think about this.
But would Biden veto it? Oh, because it's legislation. He'd veto it so you can't find out the truth.
And if you do get the majority of Democrats on board, tell me what Democrat would want to vote against it in the Senate.
No one.
Oh, man. You talk about a boomerang. The moment you cast that vote for no,
right,
you're going to be on every news channel a lot. So then they get bipartisan support, and Biden says no?
You have the votes already in the Senate because you've got Tester, Manchin, and now Brown. That's 3 Democrats.
Yeah.
That have, come forward.
Right.
So you got the votes in the Senate to pass it.
Right.
And as you said, who's going to vote against it?
Go ahead and vote against it. Who's going to vote against it right now? Man, if you get this thing to a vote, because there are two things here. The administration, Biden vetoes this. Can you imagine that? And that probably is also part of the play here. We ultimately want them to admit whether or not they have the power to claw this back, to refreeze these funds. And part of that demonstration is going to be quite possibly a defiant president who vetoes it?
Well, because now, before you even have a vote,
Mm-hmm.
now tomorrow the question will be to Kirby, the Senate now, and you've got enough votes with the Democrats that have publicly come out in the Senate wants to immediately freeze the funds.
Yeah.
Why isn't the president doing it?
Yeah.
This thing, it's not going anywhere. They think it's going to disappear. It's not going to disappear.
No. This isn't going anywhere because, first of all, the Republicans on Capitol Hill know. You can't let it go anywhere. Because if you sat and ignored these opportunities, these aren't just political opportunities, by the way. There needs, if this administration is going to do nothing, then it's up to our elected representatives to force them to do something. So on the surface, you can look at it from those eyes and say, okay, he's not going to do anything about those funds. Our elected representatives at least need to try to force him to do something about those funds. And however that turns out, whether he has the ability or not, it will all be learned. Or if he's going to be defiant and say no through a veto, but he would have, I don't know how you don't have a veto-proof majority. So then what?
Well, you have to get the House. Can the Republicans put through legislation in the House with a temporary speaker? Because why haven't they done it?
Do you do that the moment you get a speaker?
Yeah, because you need the 2/3 to over.
If it's not done by then, you would need to get that done. And again, I guess aside from Tlaib, who votes against it?
Because it's for you think that Biden, you think the Democrats believe they can make a case that it's for humanitarian aid in Iran?
Right.
Because that's the only place you can go on it, right?
Right.
Because if they don't do that, if they were able to get this through, and the House got a speaker, and boom, the House passed the law too, and it goes to Biden's desk.
Yeah,
because it's legislation.
Yes,
Biden would have to sign it, and then either sign it or not sign it.
Right.
And then make an excuse, and then admit, well, we really don't have any control over it. Because legislation means nothing.
Right. No.
If it's not in our control, if there's no clawback in the deal, and nobody, and Andrew McCarthy pointed this out, nobody's talked about what the mechanism is where we can get the money back. Because there isn't any mechanism.
Right.
The deal was done.
Right.
And we're in the deal. I want to see the deal where Iran agreed and the United States stipulated that it can only be used for certain things, and where the mechanism is to claw back the money.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. I highly doubt that Iran would agree to give the U.S. that kind of control. Iran had the hostages. They had what the U.S. wanted. It was their deal. It was their terms. So I highly doubt there is a mechanism to refreeze.
And do they know that? Are they playing stupid in the
or
Senate?
hoping that people will be, or right?
Well,
Look,
because
if you're in the Senate and you suspect it, well, there's one way to find it out, right? There's one way to confirm it that you can actually do.
Yeah, because everybody is making it sound like, they can do it. The Biden administration last month finalized a deal to grant a waiver to allow Iran to recoup $6 billion in assets. The deal's getting strong bipartisan pushback in Congress. McConnell and Cotton say they will seek unanimous consent to pass legislation to block Iran from accessing the $6 billion in funds. Now, they don't say, well, Andrew McCarthy says he can't do it.
Right.
They simply say the path of resources, training, and lethal weapons from Tehran to terrorists throughout the Middle East is crystal clear. On Saturday, it enabled, and they go through everything else. A civilized world must reimpose serious consequences and everything else. Iran's the worst state sponsor of terrorism. And just goes through everything. But do they actually know that this is the way that they can force the president? There's no other way.
Right.
The president can continue to lie on it and say we can freeze it. Well, why don't you?
Why don't
Because you actually can't.
Right.
And so what Congress does and the Republicans, we're trying to freeze it. We're trying to oh, they were lying. They made a deal and they lied to you about the deal.
Right.
So the Biden administration lied again about the deal. They've been lying all along. Now let's look at the history of the Biden administration. Why are they making decisions that make Iran flush with cash when they know that cash goes to Hamas and Hezbollah? And the result is what you just saw last week.
And what might still come.
Yeah, and how do you defend against that? You can't.
There's no way.
Nope.
There's no way.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Here's a story of interest. Black Lives Matter Chicago. You had Black Lives Matter Chicago, then Black Lives Matter Grassroots. That represents over 24 chapters across the country. Both come out with pro-Hamas tweets and statement the other day. Black Lives Matter Chicago chapter on Wednesday deleted their controversial pro-Hamas tweet, but doubled down on its support for the Palestinian cause. So,
yeah. Something to the effect of, we're not proud of what we said about it, but we still essentially support the cause. That to me is indicative. I mean, we know who they are. I said it yesterday. We're separating the radicals from the rest of the world on this. Mm-hmm. That line is drawn. And if you had any questions, you either support radicals who support these kind of actions, clearly, or you don't. No in between.
Well, the thing is, the what they put out was the tweet with with a meme. It says, "I stand with Palestine."
Right.
And then there were paragliders coming in.
Right. Yeah. It was the picture
with the
right.
paraglider, which is the paragliders that came into the music festival to kill those civilians there.
Right.
And that was, by the way, they're not apologizing.
No.
It just got,
they're just saying that, maybe the timing was wrong.
Well, no, for me, I don't even if they said they apologize, they're not apologizing, because what you first come out with, your first statement, is what you believe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's just the politics and any potential future fundraising, which probably they're not going to see much of anymore.
But even the apology, they couldn't get right because they mean it.
Yeah.
They meant it the first time.
They meant it the first time. And we told everybody, and we bring this up over and over again because at times we felt we were alone. It was us and a few others in conservative talk radio fighting back against the lies and the insane racism of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
and we were on it from the very, very beginning.
Yep.
And so we sat there, and you felt like back then you were alone because everybody fell for the BS.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to be conned. Everybody wanted to believe the lie.
Well, corporations were buying into it.
Corporations like crazy.
And
we said at the time they're being conned. They're buying into a lie.
And the NBA, remember the NBA?
Yeah.
Whole season, giving them prominence in the games.
Yep.
And then the commissioner at the end of that season, we're going a different direction. Makes you wonder what they were learning about the organization before it came out about enriching themselves and everything else. We were able to see it from the beginning. But way too many people were blinded by their garbage. And you learn that they're radicals. This is how they think. Like you said, they meant it the first time. They support this.
Yep.
That's who they are.
And I'll say this again and again and again and again, because you have Democrats saying, we're not a part of this, we're not a part of this. The Democratic Party is the party that has institutionalized racism in this country.
Yep.
They were the biggest influence and financer of slavery and Jim Crow laws of any other organization in the United States of America in that time from the Civil War on.
Yep.
And so now they do it, but they call racism anti-racism. But everything that they support is identity politics, from the racism of critical race theory to the Democratic Party and the attacks on black conservatives.
Yeah.
And we've stated this many, many times, but it needs to be said because they're the ones, number one, victim and oppressor and identity politics. We judge you by groups, not individuals. All the radical left did was add Jews. That's all they did.
Right.
We're just adding Jews to the list of identity politics, and we're going to judge them as a group.
Right.
Now, many Democrats haven't gone that far, but you start that path when you practice identity politics and do not judge people as individual human beings, but as representative of a group based on physical characteristics or religion.
Yeah, there's no way your behavior demonstrates who you are.
Yep.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Well, the House Conference voted, and Steve Scalise, won it 113 to 99 for Speaker over Jim Jordan. Now, what happens next? Well, they got to figure out how many votes they can get for Scalise.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to get any Democratic help.
Right.
And I think they're doing it very quietly. Let's listen to Matt Gaetz as he responded yesterday when he came out of the conference meeting. Here we go.
What did you think of the pitch that they were making?
Honestly, I thought both of them did a really good job. I think we saw vision and a real sense of purpose from both Mr. Scalise and Mr. Jordan.
But you haven't made it. What are you weighing? What are you torn about?
I want to make sure that we've got a real plan to put downward pressure on spending. That's what's brought us to this point, and I really want to see that we're on a path to better fiscal policy.
What did you hear in there from some of the members who they've been talking about wanting some sort of retaliation against yourself and the others who voted against McCarthy? Was there discussion of that in that meeting?
I didn't pay much attention to that.
Did you ask any questions inside the room?
I did.
What did you ask about?
I don't believe I said.
What was that?
I don't believe I said.
Would you mind talking about what you asked?
Oh, yeah, I'll probably leave that for in there.
So there you go. As you can see that he's a lot calmer.
A lot more subdued. Certainly not what we saw last week. And it's quite likely that the party knows, including Matt Gaetz. Let's get through this process, put a speaker in place, and move on. Everything right now needs to be focused on what we do about Israel. Everything needs to be focused on highlighting this administration's series of bad decisions.
And you're going to have to get to all the other issues, the domestic issues, because they're going to be there. Spending's going to be there. You know, I still look at it, though, as, because the media going back and forth, between Jordan and Scalise and I don't know what if they've got the votes or not for Scalise, but I still wonder about the imagery of it because, you saw the headline, Trump loses because Jordan loses. Well, actually, Jordan was closer to McCarthy than Scalise is. Even though Scalise was number 2, they really didn't get along. Right. Jordan was closer to McCarthy. Right. So it's interesting that it's like everything is sort of just melding now into this, I don't know.
Heaping, steaming pile?
Well, no, I don't want to. No, I don't want to say that. All right, here's what I'll say. And here's the disagreement, I believe, going on between Republicans right now. There are Republicans. I got a buddy of mine yesterday. Jim Jordan. It's got to be Jim Jordan because he'll go after him. Well, is that what you want in a speaker? Do you want Jim Jordan? Do you want the Jim Jordan that is screaming at a witness to be explaining what you wish to do going up to 2024? And I like Jim Jordan. I'm just setting the scenario of what his personality is like.
What is his role?
What is the goal of the Republican Party? Is it to win in 2024? Is it to close down the government now because you believe you can win by closing down the government now? When you don't have the numbers really to do anything? Is your job to convince independents that you're the party to vote for? And then you ask a question. Can Jim Jordan, if he uses his style, and by the way, I like his style, but I'm setting the style of his personality, and he attacks witnesses, and I know that's what some Republicans want. My buddy wants that. And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, but you understand, you're preaching to the converted. That doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
So is it the promotion of rage, irrespective of where it goes, or is it to win in 2024?
The focus has to be on 2024. That's been the focus should have been the focus from day one. When they don't have the margin, if they had a greater margin, they can afford a number of back and forths on the issues. Right now, you're trying to convince independents to be loyal to your party in November of 24.
We mentioned yesterday that he came out, that Matt Gaetz came out and was talking about Jim Jordan. He goes, they both had good things, but Jim Jordan, I don't want a continuing resolution. But Jim Jordan said, well, maybe a continuing resolution with cuts is a way to go. And that's something to consider, even though I'd rather not have that. Well, that's why you said that's one of the major reasons. And he said it again now. It's cutting is his major. He just said it. Cutting's my major cause. Right here. And so he doesn't want a continuing resolution. They got from the House Freedom Caucus the last bill that really wasn't McCarthy's bill, but he said, okay, you guys got it. We'll send this one. Gaetz voted against it.
Right.
So my question would be, and maybe an observation, I see a little Manchin in Gaetz, which is you make the statement about something that you want, and then you start slowly backing off in tone.
Yeah, there's some of that going on.
And I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying Gaetz is a Democrat. I'm just saying, style-wise, I went, oh, okay, I've seen this before.
Well, because there was, only so far that the tactic was going to work for you. I mean, if your only goal was to defeat Kevin McCarthy, well, then that was it. You say your goal is about fiscal sanity and greater fiscal policy and downward pressure on spending. And conservatives agree with you. But what does this get you? It doesn't get you there. Only a greater win with a greater margin in 2024 will get you to that point. You send a message, but what is the message? That this is going to be the remedy going forward if I disagree with the speaker on how they move on spending? Because you can't use this every time. And I think it's probably pretty clear. It sounds like, based on his tone, that Matt Gaetz knows this was your one flare.
I mean, he's taken it down a couple of levels the last couple of days.
Sure.
I mean, it's obvious that his tone is way down from where it was.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But I don't think they want to. I think the seriousness of the Israeli situation and the political opportunity that comes out of this,
right?
Because that would be the question. Do you believe, and nobody really could answer the question for me, if you shut down the government next week or in a month in this new budget deal, and Republicans are blamed for it, how does it help you politically in 2024?
Right.
Well, it doesn't matter. We just need to stop it. Yeah, but it does matter because there's more that comes after it.
Yeah. There's a lot more.
And we've seen history. We've seen every time that the Republicans are blamed, they finally have to compromise, and the compromise a lot of times is worse than what they originally had to begin with.
Yeah, right. They end up having to cut their losses. Yeah, and that's not going to work. It never does.
And as I said before, Jim Jordan could be a great speaker. I don't know. He could completely mellow out and communicate, and he can't be the Jim Jordan. I don't believe he can be the Jim Jordan. And I think a lot of Republicans want the Jim Jordan that's screaming at a witness.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because they want the speaker to expel their rage of what they have against the Democrats. But that's not the role of the speaker in 2023, 2024.
Well, to carry the torch all the way to the mountain to kill the monster, and that's not going to that's not the way it would work. You want that in committee.
And as I said last week, again, let me put a disclaimer here. Biden is getting so bad. Let me put the disclaimer here because I've said this. I'll throw out my thoughts, but they're not absolute because Biden is just so incredibly bad. There may be a point where American independents want to hear that rage from Republicans about the insanity of the Biden administration.
Yeah, I guess it could be.
I don't think that's right now. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you and I won't predict this election. We have no idea what's going to happen because there are so many things that the American public has never, the majority of the American public has never had to deal with. Inflation, number one. You saw the TIP poll that was taken. You got, 63% of people blame Biden for the border.
Yeah.
Now, and that was end of September, way before this happened.
Right.
In Israel.
Right.
What's that going to be now?
I don't know where his polling numbers go because the one thing you and I talked about this during one of the breaks earlier, and my guess is in the wake of these horrific events in Israel and the details that we're learning, you have a public is a free society is not just mourning, but they're in shock. This hits and reverberates. And one of the questions that comes about in the grieving process is, how does this happen? And then you start seeing that in the polls. We saw it after the botched exit of Afghanistan. But this is going to be a war that goes on for a while. This is going to be something where the stories and the images are not going to go away. It won't be in the bubble of today or this week or this month. And that has the potential of greatly negatively affecting his approval numbers. And I'd love to see where independents feel. I think you could be onto something in terms of, the rage by independents. It could be getting to a boiling point, and we're not going to see it until, the polls start showing it. And then the
closer
political
to the election,
season,
right.
yeah, the political season ramps up and is a lot more active on the ground.
I have no idea where the public stands right now on the issues that will make them vote.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah. To the point that
they
it motivates them
to
in
vote
one way
a
or
certain
the other.
way.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly.
I know where they stand in the polling.
Right.
But they don't vote necessarily the way
Nope.
that they poll.
No,
on the
you're right.
issue.
We've seen that. We've
So,
seen that, and I'm historically, you and I have seen that, and we scratch our heads every single time of how does that work. But it is exactly how it plays out many political seasons.
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. You know, it's one thing that we did learn from all of this, though, is the goal of Islamic jihadism.
Yeah.
And it's not even for power and control. It's to murder in the most vicious way.
Yep. Human
beings.
Yep.
Babies.
Yeah.
Kill defenseless people. Understand that's who the enemy is. We saw it on September 11th, and we forgot.
Yeah.
We forgot. We've stated this every September 11th. We asked it both. We didn't work together after September 11th, but we said, we hear never forget, never forget. How long will that last? And it didn't last a long time.
Right.
When you think about that, you saw the type. When we say terrorism, maybe that isn't descriptive enough. When we just use the term terrorism, these are terrorists across the border. These are animalistic butchers, is what they are.
Yeah, yeah.
There's and think about this, and that's why when you sit back and you look at it and you go, so you're telling me that American money went to help create that. Or not American money. Well, we did some actually taxpayer dollars we have sent to Iran for humanitarian purposes where we don't know where they went outside of the $6 billion. I've seen some figures on that over the last couple of weeks. But the fact is we allowed this money because it wasn't being allowed, and this administration allowed Iran to gather this money, billions of dollars, and give it to the worst terrorist organizations, these animalistic butchers. Now, I guess the question is for America, are we going to look up this and are we going to want accountability on this? Are we going to state that we can't be doing this anymore? Because we now know who our enemy is. Should we be supporting our enemy in any way?
If you don't draw the line here, I don't know where you draw the line.
Well, when you see the butchery, the sadistic butchery there, well, then should we be saying, well, we want to help them humanitarianly speaking, these countries?
Right.
Or should we say, nope.
Cut them off.
Cut them off.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA and around the world, we are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Just looking to hear some of the minutes being released from the Federal Reserve get-together yesterday. Federal Reserve officials at their September meeting differed on whether any additional interest rate increases would be needed, though the balance indicated that one more hike would be likely. Minutes released on Wednesday showed. You saw wholesale prices were up.
Yeah.
Wholesale inflation prices came out yesterday.
Right.
While there were conflicting opinions on the need for more policy tightening, there was unity on one point that rates would need to stay elevated until policymakers are convinced inflation is heading back to 2%.
The minutes basically point to at least one more hike, and that's what most people had, most of the analysts watching it had felt that was going to happen. But the question is the one, if you do another quarter of a point, is that enough? I don't know. I can't tell you. Because we're seeing the housing number or the shelter numbers that are now catching up with the inflation reports because it is a lagging indicator or lagging part of that indicator. And as it catches up, and then you see energy prices, still relatively high, then we could see if there is what the median forecast is for today on September inflation.
Well, you're looking for that. U.S. wholesale prices, before they get to the retail, rose last month at the fastest pace since April, suggesting that inflationary pressures remain despite a year and a half of higher interest rates. This from Associated Press. The Labor Department reported Wednesday that its producer price index, which measures inflation before it hits consumers, climbed 2.2% from a year earlier. That was an uptick from 2% in August. On a month-to-month basis, producer prices rose at 0.5% from August to September, down from 0.7% from July to August.
So here's the median forecast for inflation. We'll get these inflation numbers for September at 8:30 Eastern. On inflation month over month, the median forecast is for 0.3%. Last month it was 0.6. Core CPI month over month is also at 0.3, and it was at 0.3 last month. Again, these are the median forecast numbers. CPI year over year, 3.6 versus the 3.7 the previous month, 3.6 the median forecast there. And core CPI year over year, the median forecast is for 4.1%, and last month it was at 4.3%. Again, these are the median forecasts, which means that the analysts, half the analysts believe it's going to be higher, half the analysts believe it's going to be lower. Also coming out today is the Social Security adjustment, the administration, their annual cost for living adjustment is going to be announced. I don't know how that doesn't also go up, for 2024, based on, where we are with inflation and everything else. We're not at the point of taming inflation yet, so we'll see what the Social Security Administration says later today on cost of living adjustment for next year. But we'll see those inflation numbers here in about less than 4.5 hours.
Now, we can talk all we want the numbers, but what matters is the experience that each and every consumer feels when they go into the store. I mean, not just feel, but sees. I mean, they observe what it is, and there's an emotional reaction to it. I had one yesterday. Now, we may sound okay, but both Eric and I have been sick the last 24 hours. We both have wicked colds. And so yesterday I think yesterday was probably the worst day.
Yeah, it was for me.
Yeah, and hopefully it's getting better. Hopefully it'll be, better today.
Yeah.
So yesterday when I woke up, I had a ton of things to do because going to New York over the weekend, then I got some family coming in to visit me next week. And so cutting the lawn, feeling terrible. I mean, but I got to get it done because I'm out of town on Friday. So I got to get this stuff done. So I'm getting it all done. I'm like, okay, finally. It's like, well, you know something? I feel okay right now. I feel, I'm just going to run to the store to get a last few things.
Right.
So that's what's on my mind. Just the last few things that I might need.
Right.
And it's for the guest, bathroom and, stuff like the shampoos or whatever they,
sure.
That kind of stuff. And seems like I'm in there for about, 7-8 minutes, $107.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it just hit me because I went, what? 107? What?
Yeah.
And I'm like, if that hits me like that, and I'm in a position after working my entire life where I've saved money, still it's a huge hit. You notice it, and it affects you.
Oh,
You go,
yeah.
Whoa.
And then shopping for a family.
And I can't imagine somebody right now. You and I have often said it. We don't know how people are making it right now.
No, it boggles my mind sometimes when I think about. There was another story about. In fact, I think it was the Wall Street Journal about how the move from California to Texas, people leaving California, the number one destination when they move right now is the state of Texas, and it's the housing costs are going up. Are being affected directly by that, not just inflation, not just the interest rates going up on the mortgage, but also the houses. So if I think they focused on one couple in San Antonio that was saying, we wanted to move and get this house, and just the costs have gone up tremendously, just in over the last couple of years. And part of that is due to the fact that there still is a healthy demand. And when you're moving from California, what you get in Texas, and I made this point in the article, but you and I have talked about it, but what you get for your money in Texas is much greater. It's a much better bargain in Texas. And I think they also focused on some people moving from Illinois and New York. But I don't know. I think of my kids who are all in their late 20s all the way up to, my oldest is going to turn 41 next month. Now, my two oldest already have their houses. They have equity in their homes. They have great mortgages. They have great rates on their mortgages. But heaven help you if you want to move or need to move. And I don't know, in the situation now, there really is not much of a choice if you're renting an apartment, because rent is going to go up. It's going to keep skyrocketing. So you try and find a cheaper place. So what does that mean in an area like ours? It means you have to move out further, which means your commute's going to be longer if you're not working from home. Or you're going to have to take on a roommate, or you're going to have to move in with someone and become the roommate. And then beyond that, it's also living with your parents.
Yeah,
that's skyrocketing. By the way, we saw that it's still very much in play in Japan. When you look at their recession, you look at their economy and everything else, and it just became normal for multiple generations to live under one roof. And that's becoming more normal here in the States. And so, those are, shelter costs, food costs, energy costs, all of those right now are at peak levels. And now this is where you start to see that individual debt is on the rise, unsecured debt, because of the interest rates. Harder to get the car you want. The cost of the car is going through the roof. And then, of course, the cost for shelter, as we mentioned. All of these things are a tremendous weight. And this is where I think the Republican Party has to come in, and they have to demonstrate where we are, how we got here, and how we fix it. And those are the things that you have to identify and repeat over and over and over and over again on just the economy. That doesn't even start to talk about national security, the border, and all the other things on our plate.
That's
right
why
now.
when you're saying, like Gates is constantly talking about stop spending, stop spending, stop spending, stop spending. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. You have to tell people why we need to stop spending.
Right.
Every time you say stop spending, You have to remind people the inflation you're seeing today. You know the economic hell you've gone through the last couple of years? That's why I want to cut spending.
Yeah.
This isn't something of, I want to take something away from you.
Right.
This government has taken from you. Look at what the inflation has done to the cost of living. We're trying to make your life easier. The Republicans aren't doing that.
Well,
they simply say, we need to cut spending, cut spending, cut spending. And then the Democrats see, they want to cut spending and take away your programs.
Right.
We know the Republicans know why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Explain it.
You've got to. You don't just say it is. You've got to demonstrate why it is, and then also demonstrate what you can do about it.
And that's the frustrating thing for me with Republicans still. It's always been, if you've been a long time listening to the show, they couldn't communicate. They couldn't communicate that, that there's a beautiful beach right in front of you with beautiful warm water and women in bikinis. If you're a 20-year-old male, they couldn't communicate effectively what was over that sand dune.
Right. Yeah.
And it gets to be frustrating because every single major issue, and you think about it, there's a reason for it. There's a reason that on every single major issue that exists today, the Republicans have a landslide polling numbers on the issues of where they stand.
Yeah.
They still can't get
They
many
still
people's
can't get it
votes.
done. You can't move people. You can't get them to the polls. Because the fear-mongering by the left has been there for a long, long time. It's their game, and nobody beats them at it.
But you can win it. If you communicate effectively, you can win this. And
You
that's,
can.
That's the frustrating thing for us when
You
we get
can.
upset. And
Exactly.
we know,
You just
we
have
know,
to do it.
And we know people get upset. It's like, well, no, but it's wrong, and they need to rage. Well, if you rage all the time and you continue to lose, that doesn't do anything for you.
No.
You've got to explain to people why your plan is better. It's what we do every day.
Yep.
It's what we do every day. We tell you what we believe.
Yep.
By the way, just going back very quickly, when you say, Tlaib yesterday or 2 days ago walking, wouldn't answer the question from Hillary Vaughn from Fox News.
Right.
It's just it's when I chuckled there, it's at her response that she can't do it. I want to make this clear.
Yeah.
She just she wouldn't answer the question and turned and just looked at her, whatever. And she's simply asking a question. Could you respond to the babies being decapitated? Could you respond to what your position is on this? And you're flying the Palestinian flag outside. And the fact she couldn't answer the question, has that ever happened to you in your life where you couldn't answer a question?
No.
As a talk show host?
Especially on something with such strong conviction.
Were you ever walked away?
No. Nope.
These people deal. They're legislators. They're representatives. All they do is deal with issues every day.
Yep.
And she can't answer it?
No.
Now, does that mean that she knows she's wrong? Does it mean
At the very least, she knows she's not going to win.
That was my next one. Does she know she can't win it, or does she know she's wrong, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, probably a little of both.
It's a foreign concept to me where somebody would ask me a question, I'm not going to answer them.
Right. Yeah, my conviction is going to lead.
Especially in the setting where it's a legit reporter
Yeah.
asking you a specific question on tape, whatever, that should be easy to answer.
Right.
866-90-RED-I.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on roadside inspections. Drivers must always be prepared for a roadside inspection. This means drivers should always have their personal, vehicle, and company credentials organized and ready, and having any shipment paperwork such as bills of lading or hazardous materials shipment emergency response information organized and ready for the inspection official. Just an FYI, the top 2 violations written against drivers every year, as well as during Operation Road Check, are log general form and manner and log not current. Both are completely avoidable if the driver keeps the log accurate, compliant, and current at all times. Having the vehicle ready for inspection involves the driver conducting daily inspections and making sure any problems that are discovered are immediately corrected. Vehicle readiness also requires the company to make sure that the vehicle is current on all scheduled maintenance and that the maintenance schedule is adequate. This will make sure the driver is being given a sound vehicle to start with. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. One of the things we've talked about is how will everything in Israel affect, what the people of the United States think, the voter of the United States. It does highlight a bunch of different things here, as we had mentioned earlier. Everything goes to, what our national policy should be. Mm-hmm. Now we know what the enemy is. This is crystal clear. You have Israel that has a ton of media that has made it clear, and you've got enough international media there to show the absolute butchery of Hamas, which is Islamic jihadism is what it is. Mm-hmm. And we know that it's not even about taking over a country. It's not even about oppressing you. It's about murdering civilians.
Yeah, it's not even about establishing or becoming a caliphate anymore. It's not. It's about murdering innocents in the most gruesome way.
Yep. And so you look at it, that everything that we're talking about here, everything with the U.S. policy and what happened here, you can look at energy. Why are we begging dictators? Mm-hmm. Why are we begging dictators to produce fossil fuels for us when we're shutting down leases here?
Right.
There was a thing where you saw Exxon made that, the big consolidation together.
Right.
So they can be drilling in the Permian Basin.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, isn't it interesting that what Biden is doing is creating the big companies to get bigger and the small oil companies are gone.
Yeah.
Because, that's what you need to do in these situations. But, you look at, begging dictators to, have the U.S. be dependent on dictatorial regimes. Mm-hmm. Think about this, what John Kirby said yesterday when you and I said it, when he started talking about supply and demand. Mm-hmm. He was saying that we need to have Iranian oil because that keeps the price of gasoline down in the United States.
Right.
He actually said it.
Yeah.
And it's just, and we won't, they're slow walking any effort to expand drilling in the United States. Well, they actually make that comment that, oh, no, we know, because what he is saying is he's communicating to me, it's okay if Iran gets the money and uses it for terrorism against Israel that gets Americans killed as long as gas prices are low.
Right.
Why didn't anybody else pick up on that except us?
No, I haven't heard anybody else make that point. No. But it's clear.
And so you just wonder on a whole different thing. We got a bunch of polling here, but what will the polling look? How will this affect the polling over the next year?
Five hours a night, and still not enough. Listen to our podcast, available on the app and on our website, redeyeradioshow.com.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So I started thinking about, where we're going because, we talked earlier about, Scalise and Jordan and who's going to be Speaker of the House and where the Republican Party, wishes to go. And what, the Speaker, do you want more of a pit bull, Jim Jordan, to be putting out your message, or do you want somebody who is, has a more mellow presentation like a Scalise? And the whole point of that is, where are the independents right now? And I said, I don't know. Maybe if the Republicans rage and make sense, independents may say, yeah. Because the things we've been dealing with over the last 3 years are insane. I mean, they're insane, and independents know that. And so I don't know. I don't think anybody knows precisely what will convince them. Now, we were looking at just some different polls out there, and we were looking at the Emerson poll for Pennsylvania, and that got a lot of news yesterday where Trump is up on Biden by 9.
Yeah, right.
That may be an outlier, but who knows? And that's why I state with everything going on here, the insanity of the United States government being involved, the Biden administration changing what the Trump administration did. And by the way, this is one of the things, and Brit Hume said it the other day. He says, you might not like Trump, but on the issues, it's a lot better than what we're seeing right now. And we've always stated this on the actual issues for Trump. On the issues, he was a moderate.
He wins.
He wasn't a radical.
Yeah.
He was a moderate.
Yep.
But when you look at right now, if you take what's our relationship with Iran, well, he was saying, sorry, nope. You know something? We're not going to go to war with you, but we'll kill your leaders. That's what he did with Soleimani.
Yeah.
And boy, that sent a message out. And then he said, sorry, no more oil money. You don't make it.
Right.
Biden comes in and says, oh, okay, we're not going to enforce the federal law sanctions on Iranian oil.
Right.
Boy, that sounds familiar. It's sort of like the border, isn't it? It seems to me. And it's like now we see the result of that. We see the result of giving them. And if anybody tries to tell you that by allowing the United States and the Biden administration to drop the oil sanctions and enrich Iran with $30, $40, $50 billion, that didn't go into the terrorist attack that we saw the other day, that no money went into that whatsoever, you're going to have a hard time convincing most Americans of that.
Yeah.
And so you look at those things, you look at the border right now, and the latest poll here, this is the end of this is September 27th through the 29th. You now have, what is it? Is it 63%? How would you describe the current situation at the United States southern border in Mexico? The poll was taken September 27th to the 29th, margin of error of 2.7. The response was clear. 72% of Americans called it either a crisis or a major problem. 22% said it was either a minor problem or not a problem. 6%, I don't know. Republicans came out, called it the highest, 88% calling the illegal border crossings a crisis or a major problem, and just 10% calling the problem minor or non-existent. That was that the Mitt Romney part of the Republican Party?
Right.
Independents were somewhat below Republicans, 64-25, but Democrats weren't far behind, 62-32. Wow. Of all the 26 demographic groups that they track each month, just one group was less than a majority, the younger cohort, which includes those 18 to 24 years old. Even among the young, there was a plurality of 44% to 34%, not a problem. Crisis, major problem, whatever. Some interesting results. Overall, 62% of the two largest minority groups, blacks and Hispanic, called uncontrolled immigration across our border a crisis or major problem. 27% didn't think that way. Okay. What else do we have here? Overall, 63% said President Biden was either very responsible or somewhat responsible, while just 28% said he was either not responsible or not responsible at all. 9%. So there you go. Now, that was before all this happened. You don't think Americans now are going to be focused on what is going on at the border after what happened in Israel? And that's why I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know how independents are feeling right now. Back in November of 2022, it didn't seem like inflation had the effect that Republicans thought it would have.
Right.
Will it now? Will a combination of everything that we have,
Well, I guess that's it. It's that compounding effect of all of it, and the fact that it is relentless. Had the public, had so many people in the public become, I guess, in their mind, trained to think that this is only transient, that, inflation is transient, that this thing will pass, they'll do something, they'll start sending out checks soon enough, it can't go on forever on the economy. Well, now you add to it the very real and serious and immediate concerns on national defense, and that really, the border has to be the focus. Shut the door. And in people's minds, that's what they're screaming, because one of the things that happens in the wake of such horrific events, and they're in history, there are only a few that you can point to. What happened in Israel? I don't know that we've fully measured how massive this is as a world event. I really don't know that we fully measure that. I still think we're in shock and haven't had enough time to look at this. And I know people are saying it. I know we talk about it. But I mean, as a society, it is massive. And in the wake of such events, in a free society, people tend to get nervous. That fear is very real, because the question is, what will the enemy, do next?
It's interesting that when you say that, because when you got to the point of the decapitation of children, that they, cut babies' heads off.
Yeah.
While their parents watched before they killed them.
Yeah.
And you think about that for a moment and you're completely outraged, but you really don't want to think about it, do you?
No, you don't. No, you want to look away. It's gruesome.
Yeah,
it's the worst.
Right. I can say it. I'm saying it right now, but if I say it and think about it, I might not be able to get through the day.
No, it is.
So
it has tremendous weight. It has.
Yeah.
It is something that is so hard to comprehend. It's so hard to think about. It's so hard to think about the families now that are dealing with that grief, and as a society, how we all are grieving here. And quite often, and you and I talked about this off the air earlier, and quite often in such scenarios, you kind of become numb. The shock of it all just has you, just trying to shut it off and not think about it.
Well, it's another lesson about our enemy. It's another lesson about Islamic jihadism. It's like, well, they want to control you. No, they want to kill you.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about your soldiers. They want to massacre you. You and I always said this about 9/11, and people don't, really understand it. They expected at that point that there'd be 25,000 people in each of those buildings. Right. They wanted to kill 50,000 civilians.
Right.
That was their goal.
Yep.
On 9/11.
Right.
That was the goal. Because that's how many people were in those buildings at that time. And so understand, it's not about, we have a different political ideology than you do, and we'd like to spend more on Social Security or welfare benefits. It's, you're dead.
Yeah.
That's it. No discussion. You're dead. And in the most brutal way and dehumanizing way possible, to strike terror into you, to strike fear into you. Now, I will say this. The immediate reaction is, I know that when I think about what that situation would be like, the decapitation of my child in front of me before I was killed, those moments, those seconds in between are indescribably horrible. You can't imagine it. But you let that go very quickly, and it becomes anger over the people that did it, and realize those people cannot live.
Right.
People with that
They
mentality
must be
who support
eliminated
that
completely.
have to be eliminated. They don't want to be a part of society. They really don't want to negotiate. The interesting thing is, and I think it was the Wall Street Journal that said, look, the head of Hamas laid it all out.
Mm-hmm.
He laid it out that it's like, what we did. We pretended that we were taking care of
Palestinians.
the Palestinians,
Right.
that we were concerned of governing about them, and the Israeli government bought it.
Right.
And meanwhile, the entire time, it was sort of a Trojan horse in a way.
Yeah, they were really building their Trojan horse.
Right. That and this comes from the leader of Hamas.
Yeah.
In an interview, I guess he did with Russia Today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll find it here because I got it somewhere here, but I'll get it because it's
and there can't be any question now. There are no questions now about who Hamas is and what they're about.
No,
there aren't any questions.
Or anyone involved in the Islamic Jihad, the radical
Right.
Islam. This
Right.
is what we saw it with ISIS. We saw it with I can't think of it. Al Qaeda.
Right.
We saw it. And now it's getting even more brutal. And now it's not even an attempt to say, well, we're fighting your soldiers to do it. It's like, no, our goal is just to massacre. And Hamas made it clear that was their goal.
Strike at every turn and every opportunity. One of the things about al-Baghdadi is that they credit him for basically inspiring the whole lone wolf thing, because that's what he would preach, that you use whatever is necessary and you do this even if you have to do it alone, you do it for the cause. I don't know how, in terms of recruiting and getting their message out, Hamas would be any different. You do anything and everything, even if you have to do it alone. And that has to be something that is of great concern to every free person on the planet. Every American and every free person must be concerned about the enemy. And we don't have a choice. There is no more choice, because it is us or them. They must be eliminated.
You may not like it, but it's reality. Israel's enemies are our enemies.
Yes.
And what they did to Israeli citizens and Americans and other nationalities that were over there, they would do to you tomorrow.
They are an enemy to humanity.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Carly, and I'm Gary McNamara. So we never make predictions on sports or anything else. So you think they'll come to a consensus and get Scalise in?
I think they do.
As Speaker?
I think they do. Yeah, I think they will. One of the things about Steve Scalise is, he does have the respect of some Democrats, but certainly has respect of from the GOP. You and I talked about it, I think, really going back to January, when the whole 15 days of McCarthy. Is that a
I like
did
that.
someone make the documentary yet?
I like that.
Trying to get him in the first time, and we talked about Steve Scalise, but we just kind of dismissed it, saying probably wasn't going to happen. But especially with his blood cancer diagnosis, then that became less likely, and it wasn't expected of him. But I think now we're in a situation where the GOP knows they need to do this, and Steve Scalise has that kind of respect.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.